Is it possible to make a phone call from Earth to Mars using SpaceX Starlink? Let's go find out. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much once again joining me for tea time. Today we have a little bit of fireside. That smokiness, so good, so good. I hope you're joining me with your cup of tea, maybe a cup of coffee, hanging out, talking tech, talking photo, talking video. Today is going to be a geeky day. We're gonna get our geek on. If you're a nerd, you're gonna like it. If not, you probably want to watch something else, right? I love nerding out with some of this stuff because I just like taking things to the next level in comparison to every other video that you see on the topic, right? Anyways, today we're going to be talking about what I spoke about on the JC Live on Friday. And what's really odd is we were talking about communication between Earth and Mars and the possibility and the way I thought it would have to go down for it to work. And what was interesting is a day later, someone asked Elon Musk a similar question and he responded. So I want to get into that response. I was reading it over on Benzinga, the article. I'm going to read to you the article, or it's just very short, and then give you my commentary on it. And then we're going to dive in really geeky and get down into the mathematics to answer the question, is it possible to make a phone call from Earth to Mars? Why or why not? So I thought it was very interesting. If you do and you enjoy this video, even in the least, consider throwing it a thumbs up. That would be very, very helpful. Also, if you're not subscribed, consider doing so. If you are subscribed, thank you very much. Click this little button over here so when I go live and when a new video comes out, you will be notified of it immediately. And if you want to say thank you for all of my hard work, there's a little thank you button. You can click on that, give $1 or $2 if you like. If not, perfectly fine. Consider becoming a member of the channel. That would be even better. If you haven't downloaded any of my ebooks, check them out. They're 100% free. Go to JCristina.com/books. And when you're done watching this video, if you want more Starlink content, I put together about 240 videos now just on Starlink. I'll put a playlist right there. Go click that. Also, if you're in the market for a VPN, check out PureVPN. The nice folks over there gave us a promo code, which is JCristina. Use that at checkout or simply use the URL jcristina.com/VPN and you'll get 15 additional % off. Anyways, guys, let's get right into this Benzinga article. And then once again, I'll give you my commentary and we'll get really geeky. So the article starts out by saying SpaceX Starlink CEO Elon Musk, in response to a social media user's inquiry about Starlink's capability of interplanetary communication with Mars, detailed the challenges involved. Elon wrote, quote, "The difficulty of communicating with Mars varies tremendously. To address this, he suggested deploying a series of laser communicating satellites at different distances from the sun. In a tweet, Musk outlined his solution for achieving terabit level bandwidth, emphasizing the strategic placement of laser communication satellites. The context arose from a user's curiosity about using Starlink-like satellite clusters for high bandwidth interplanetary communication. Musk's vision of making life multiplanetary and landing humans on Mars is a driving force behind SpaceX's endeavors. The company is actively developing the Starship launch vehicle, envisioned to transport humans to Mars. Musk's ambitious timeline aims for Mars landing by 2033 and the establishment of a thriving base on the planet within 15 years. While SpaceX Starlink's internet service has gained over 2.5 million customers worldwide, the current focus remains on Earth-based internet service." Absolutely. To start out this conversation, we need to know a couple of terms. Number one, apoapsis and periapsis. What does that mean? Apoapsis is farther away. Periapsis means closer to. That's when we're talking about planetary bodies, right? The easiest way to understand this is maybe apogee and perigee. Maybe you know those terms. It goes back to the Latin or root or the Greek word, right? Apo or peri. Apo meaning away from, or peri meaning around or near to. Right? So I think that this is very important too. I was just thinking about this. I tell my kids this all the time. If you're looking to get into a field that has to do with science or mathematics or medical or anything like that, or even law, knowing some Latin or Greek helps a lot. That doesn't mean that you need to learn Latin and be able to speak it because it is a dead language, but understanding that English and many other languages that stem from a Latin root will help you a lot just in knowing words, even if you don't know what the word is, because you can break it down, right, into the subwords that are within the word. Now, another terminology when you're talking about planetary bodies is opposition in comparison to conjunction. Opposition means that the planetary body is close to the other planetary body, all right? Whereas conjunction, it means that they're further apart. Also, in conjunction, the sun is in between the two planets, all right? Once again, they are at its furthest distance. Now, when we look at this illustration, you can see in opposition, the planets are close together, whereas in conjunction, they are further apart. The only problem that I have with this illustration is just like with every other book that is scientific or astronomy or anything that you get in college or in high school or wherever, it always looks like this. And it's absolutely false. There is no circular orbit pattern in any celestial body or planetary body. It is absolutely not possible. According to the Kepler's law of planetary motion, everything has some type of elliptical shape, all right? It is a squashed, let's call it, circle. There is no perfect circle ever, period, end of story. Like there's no perfect line. That's for a whole nother video. Now, doing the math, this is why Elon Musk was quoted in saying that communication with Mars varies tremendously. This is why it varies tremendously and is based on the distance between the two planets. Now, when the planets are in their apoapsis or in opposition, when they're at their closest point apart, they're at about 54.6 million kilometers apart. 54.6. It's a lot, right? So one thing that we do have when we do math is the speed of light. So we have the distance, now we need the time. What is the speed of light? If we shoot a laser, how fast does it go in a vacuum? Well, in a vacuum, it travels right around 300,000 kilometers per second. Now, on Earth, it's going to be slower because you have atmosphere, you have different density of air. If you shoot it through a fiber optic cable, there's different grades of glass, different grades of cable. There's going to be a reduction. But whenever you see the little c in science, okay, it represents the speed of light in a vacuum. All right, so it's a constant. Now, that being said, if we take that distance and we put it over time, and we take the 54.3 million kilometers over that 300, it's actually 299,792 to be exact. Let's call it 300,000 kilometers per second. We end up with 182 seconds. That's to get something from point A to point B. From Earth to Mars, 182 seconds. But in communications, it doesn't work just a single direction. It works bilaterally, right? It works in both directions. So we have to send a packet of data to Mars, and then we need to get an acknowledgement packet back saying it got here okay. I'll get to that just a second. So we have to take the 182 seconds and then times it by 2, right? So we end up with, what is it, 364 seconds. So 364 seconds is just over 6 minutes. So let's just call it 6 minutes. So data from Earth to Mars in its best case, right, in opposition, when the planets are at the closest distance, is around 6 minutes, let's call it. We'll get into why it's not exactly 6 minutes in just a second. Now, conversely, if we look at when it's in conjunction and we have the Earth in its furthest distance from Mars, all of a sudden the numbers change from 54.6 million kilometers to 401 million kilometers. It's like what, 7+ times further distance? It is a lot. So let's do the math on that. So you do your 701 million kilometers divided with your 299, or let's call it 300,000 kilometers per second, right? And you end up with 1,338 seconds. Multiply that 1,338 by 2, and you end up with 2,676 seconds, or 44.6 minutes round trip. Let's call it 45 minutes. 45 minutes round trip, 6 minutes round trip, when it's in its opposition, or 45 minutes when it's in conjunction, when it's at its furthest distance. Do you see where Elon Musk was saying it varies tremendously? Well, that's why. Because the Earth and Mars are at different distances from the sun, and as they're going around, they're doing this at different speeds. So the amount of time that it takes, instead of 365 days on Earth, it takes a lot longer to go around the sun. So your year is going to be longer on Mars. Makes sense, right? So understanding all of this, knowing that the speed of light remains the same, we cannot change that. Understanding also when the planets are positioned in conjunction, that the other planet, doesn't matter if it's Earth or Mars, is on the other side, the backside of the sun, making it at its furthest distance. What does this also mean? There's another problem which he didn't speak about. The other problem is we need to be able to get through the sun. You can't take a laser and just beam it straight through the sun, right? It's just not possible. So we have to go around the sun. And that's where he was talking about having different satellites. And that's what I was talking about on Friday. How do you do it? Well, just like what he's doing here on Earth, or just like what we do in our home. In the home, we create a mesh network. So anywhere in your home, you're going to get really strong signal, right? The same thing holds true with SpaceX Starlink satellites with their 5,500 in LEO. There's a whole bunch, there's 5,500, let's say operational right now, and they're all meshed together through lasers, right? So if one goes down, they don't care. It just goes out of the loop. And then when it comes back up, it gets back added into the mesh network. The same thing holds true with what they're going to have to do with communication with Mars, because we would have to get around the sun to communicate. How do you do that? You build a mesh network. So you have satellites that are orbiting around the sun, right? Between Earth and Mars at different distances. What happens is since they're at different distances, they're going to be orbiting at different speeds, or it will take different durations of time to go around the sun. So they'll be scattered around that loop. That's one way to do it. The other possibility is maybe creating these satellites as geocentric satellites, just like we have on Earth, where the satellite stays in one spot. It's there all the time. It does not move. It stays in the one location over the Earth the entire time because it's spinning at the same cycle or the same speed that Earth is revolving at. It's at the right distance, let's call it, okay? So it doesn't need propulsion, very much so, to keep it in that specific location. The same thing holds true here. We can now also have satellites that are in that trajectory between Earth and Mars and keep them in that line. So in this situation, I would speculate you would need some type of propulsion system on these satellites to keep them in a specific location, so they do not move based on their distance, so that they would stay in this straight line, let's say, or slightly off. Because once again, we would need to bounce the data from satellite to satellite to satellite. And as we get closer to Mars, because the sun will be in between Mars and us, we have to go around the sun. So they have to be off axis a little bit. They can't be a straight line. But understanding how networks work and understanding that when you send a packet, you're going to have a data portion of the packet. You're going to have a data bit, right? That is your body, or let's say your payload, the data that you're sending. But then you also have your SYN packet, which is your synchronization packet. You have your ACK packet, which is like an acknowledgement packet. You have your response packet where you're asking for a response or an acknowledgement of receipt. Then of course you have a NAC, which is the exact opposite of an ACK. An ACK says, listen, I acknowledge. A NAC would be like, hey, I don't. There's something wrong. The check bit is wrong. Like a CRC error, right? A CRC error is basically a check bit or a checksum that is off. It's not correct, meaning that the data that got there is probably not right either. Please resend it. And this is where we start getting into speed problems. Once again, if it's 6 minutes round trip, when it gets there and sends back and the acknowledgement is actually a NAC, saying that, hey, the check bit is wrong, the checksum is wrong, send it again, we got another 6 minutes to get that data back, you see? So if you have errors, it really adds up quickly. So once again, to be able to have this communication at its closest closest distance between Mars and Earth, you're looking at a 6-minute round trip. And at the furthest distance, you're looking at 45 minutes. And if you add to that with all of these errors and possibilities, let's call it 10 minutes to 15 minutes at its closest location and maybe an hour at its furthest location. So the question is, can you make a phone call or video call between Earth and Mars? And the answer to that is absolutely not. You just can't. Why? Well, as we talked about, C. C cannot change. C is still a finite amount. You can only go, let's call it 300 kilometers per second. That's it. You can't change it until we can like bend time or some crazy shit that will never happen. Well, you have a finite amount of speed. And that once again is 300,000 kilometers per second. You can't change that. The only thing that we can change is distance. We cannot change the speed. The speed is what the speed is, and that is it. It's finite. So, can you have a conversation? You cannot. Because yes, even though Elon Musk says that we'll be able to do a terabit of data, but what's the latency? A terabit, yeah, you could pump a terabit down, it's no problem, but your latency is 6 minutes or longer, an hour, right? Makes sense? So your latency in comparison to what he's trying to do here on Earth, he's trying to get sub 20 milliseconds. Well, 20 milliseconds, 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. We're talking about minutes, not seconds. You see? So the only communication that we would have between Earth and Mars would probably be something like a walkie-talkie, right? Way back in the day. You would say something and then you would wait for a response. Well, instead of waiting like 30 seconds for a response or 15 seconds, whatever, you'd be waiting 6 minutes or longer, right? Maybe an hour. That's just the way it is. That's the communication that you will get. Now, once again, can you pump a ton of data down? Yes, but the communication, a live communication, will never happen. Once again, because you cannot change C. The speed of light is finite. It is specific. It cannot be bent or changed. That is it. You can slow it down, but in a vacuum, it remains the same. That is my personal opinion. I could be wrong. Once again, I'm not a physicist. I'm not like some aerospace engineer, all right? I'm just looking at the math and speculating here as we do. Anyways, I want to hear from you. If I'm wrong, I would love to be wrong. Let me know down below and we will make it right. If I'm right, that's great. Hopefully you learned something. If you enjoy this content, as I always say, throw the video a thumbs up. That is very helpful. So helpful. And finally, head over to my website, JCristina.com, where you can find all the photography tools I've invented for you and me over the very many years. And hopefully there's something there that you might like. Check out my tees, check out my merch, pick something up, support me and my family. That would be awesome. Many blessings to you and your family. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you in the next one. Love you all.